We may have a few more people show up, but we'll go ahead and get moving. Respect your lunch hour. So we'll call this meeting to order with Finance and the Budget Committee. Citizens Communication, the Finance and Budget Committee welcomes public commitment. Let me, hold on. Public comments on items relevant to the City of Pflugerville, Finance and Budget. In accordance with the Texas Attorney General's opinion, any public comment that is made on an item that is not on the published agenda will only be heard by the committee. No formal action, discussion, deliberation, or comment will be made by the committee. Each person providing public comment will be limited to 3 minutes and will be asked to state his or her name and address for the public record. Any public here? Not seeing any. We'll go to 3A, approval of minutes from the August 21st, 2024 Finance and Budget Committee meeting. So you've been provided the minutes from the last meeting. Any comments or?
I make a move we approve the minutes from August 21st.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Oh, well, seconded.
So 4A, conduct a presentation on the city's special revenue, escrow funds, and grants. So we decided that we would delve into some of our special revenues and kind of go through those and explain those and how they relate in the budget process as well. And so don't anticipate it taking the entire hour, so there might be time for y'all to actually have your lunch before you go back to work. But we'll get started. So special revenue does make up $8.3 million of our fiscal 25 budget, and this special revenue comes from varying sources, fines and fees. There's usually a restriction on these funds. So special revenue is defined as revenue received through fines and fees that has special restrictions. Usually the restrictions are placed either by state or local laws. And so we have to understand those restrictions so we know how we can use those funds. Because of that, we're always looking to spend these funds first over general funds. So we want to make sure that we understand how we can spend these funds. For instance, during the budget process, I'm looking for maybe expenditures that are being put in the general fund that could fit under one of these special revenue sources and making sure that we direct that expenditure over to that special revenue. So we'll go a little bit deeper. Oh, I don't want to touch it too many times or it'll. So on the next slide in your hands, maybe it will advance. Some of those special revenue funds are hotel occupancy tax, public educational government, and we call them PEG funds. There's quite a few municipal court fees that we get that are restricted by for different purposes. Public safety has several. We also have a tax increment investment zone. We call that our TIRS zone, and we have several public improvement districts. All right. Oh. So for hotel occupancy tax, this tax is assessed to hotels or short-term rentals that are operating within our city limits. It's 7% on the revenue that's eligible for this tax. And so in the past, we have an economic incentive agreement with the Marriott. So in the past, a lot of what we received into this fund just directly turned around and went back to that economic incentive agreement. And so it wasn't till the last couple of years that the revenue is actually starting to exceed that economic incentive commitment. And so we're able to have some of those excess revenues that we can now start pointing towards promoting tourism. And so I don't know if you saw some of they're really starting to ramp up Explore Pflugerville and a lot more information out there regarding just promoting that tourism within our jurisdiction.
And would those short-term rental, those would be like Airbnb or Vrbo or?
Yeah, there's lots of different. So one of the things that we're doing this year is we're implementing a new software that's going to help us track those and also help us get those properties into compliance. This guidance comes from the tax code, chapter 156 of the tax code. So it kind of defines like what becomes hot revenue and also how we can spend it. And there are, like I've listed here, these are just some of the things that we put in our fiscal 25 budget to try to use some of these funds. Public art is a big thing. Obviously, we have our economic incentives, but also just promotion and marketing and advertising our city. We're also trying to get staff trained and start making some of those membership relationships with tourism type associations. And then a big push on trying to figure out what those short-term rentals are in our jurisdiction and starting to enforce some compliance on that.
How are you looking at public art as a source of revenue?
No, it's a source of how we can use the funds.
Okay.
So we can use it for public art. It's one of the many
Okay.
bullet points within the state law that we can use those funds for. Very sensitive. So continuing on with the special revenue, the public education government, the PEG, we refer to it as PEG, but I want you to know like what it is. So basically this stems out of a piece of the franchise that's coming from cable companies, and they're having to pay into this fund, and the fund is restricted for capital expenditures or expenditures that fund. We do have a PFTV, and so that TV channel, there's live streaming on that TV channel of meetings, council meetings, but even like upgrading the communication for council meetings to be live streamed. I mean, that kind of can fall under this bucket as well. On the public safety side, we receive seizure or forfeiture funds sometimes. We don't budget to receive those funds, but when we do have them, we budget to expend them on appropriate expenditures. Usually that is law enforcement equipment or training. We can spend, and we also get child safety fine fees, and we do get a little bit from the state for law enforcement training. It's called LEOS funds, and the police department will earmark their budget out of that first, and then the rest of their training budget would come out of their general operating budget. On the municipal court side, we have fees that we collect for technology. There's building security fees, efficiency fees, and truancy. And so on the truancy, there's a juvenile caseworker that we would fund with those fees. On the technology side, I know in the fiscal 25 budget, we budgeted for an upgrade in the software that we're using. So we've already earmarked some of that technology money. Building security funds a bailiff during court, but we're also starting to sock away a little bit of that money, knowing that we're going to need building security within the new city hall. So we know that we have that resource sitting out there that we can use. On the efficiency side, the law is pretty vague, but if we can deem that this makes us more efficient, then we can spend those dollars on whatever that looks like, scanning or shredding or whatever. When we're budgeting, if it's a fee or fine that I can see that we get every year, I will go ahead and budget estimated revenues for that fund. But if it's like seizure or forfeiture funds where it's like we get it or we don't get it, what I usually will do is whatever ending fund balance I think we will have, I try to allow that in the budget. That way they have flexibility to spend those funds during that next fiscal year. So that's kind of how I approach some of these special revenue funds.
With the public education government, you said, is that a fee that's assessed by cable providers or
It is a breakout of their franchise fee, and
Okay.
so some of their franchise fee goes into the general fund as just regular unrestricted, but there's a portion of it that goes into the PEG fund specifically for those expenditures. Yeah, and it was kind of it's fairly new law. It used to be that they would a couple years ago they got to pick if they were paying into PEG or not. And so the law changed a little bit a couple years ago. We saw that revenue drop a little bit because we weren't getting as much from the same payers.
Sure. But that's like a fee that's assessed by state level, I guess, but paid to local
Yes.
governments for. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. This is very sensitive. Okay. So the tax reinvestment zones, the TERS and the PIDs, we have one zone. It was created, I think I looked back at around 2011. And basically the district is funded through property taxes, but they're property taxes where the district, there's a base year that's established, and any property tax growth from that base year is basically what ends up in the TERS fund. And then those funds are restricted to improvements within that district. And there is a TERS board for those funds. And so there are eligible projects within that. But it's to encourage development in those zones, and also developers, there might be some incentives there for them to come and do their developments within the TERS district.
And that's out by the Courtyard Marriott as well, the hotel out there, isn't it? The TERS.
I
zone.
don't know if that is inside of the TERS district. There is a map on our website that shows like the 4 zones within the district.
Okay.
I know we're in the district.
Oh,
Well, City Hall is,
gotcha.
and it kind of goes out the way as 40. There's a portion that's in the district, but there is a map on the website that kind of shows that district. And then another way that kind of entices development is public improvement districts. We have 3, and so some of them have been established for a while, and some of them are just now getting to the point where they are wanting to establish what that assessment might look like on those properties, and also whether they want the city to go out for bond. So we do have 2 of our 3 PIDs that would like for there to be a bond sale, so that when they spend the money and do the development, they can get reimbursed fairly quickly.
Sure.
And then we'll just have debt on the books where those assessments will actually just go towards paying that debt. And so just another development tool that we can use. And then there's what we call escrow funds. And so these are funds that in most cases are coming from planning and development. They're coming from developments that are occurring. So I use the example, and I'm simplifying a lot of this because there's a lot of code behind all of these. But basically, if a development either doesn't have the land on their development to put a park, or doesn't have enough land, they can pay into what's called a designated parkland escrow, and that allows the city to use those funds to create those parks. But there are some limitations. For instance, it has to be a regional park. We can't go put a pocket park that really just benefits one subdivision with those funds. And so there are some limitations, but I know that we have want to say about 3 million in that fund, and a lot of that's getting spent right now on replacing or creating those parks. And so that's a huge benefit for us. There's also what's called traffic impact analysis fees. Yet again, it's a developer that's putting in a new development, and they're having to go out and determine how their development is going to impact traffic. And so there's a complicated calculation of how much money they're going to have to pay. So it basically allows us to do road improvements, intersection improvements. The definition and the allowability of how we spend those funds is pretty gray. It's pretty open. So when we're looking at all of our CIP projects and we're looking at all of our buckets of funding, we look at the TIA funding to see if there's funding there before we go sell a bond to support those projects. So this is just another funding mechanism for us to be able to use. And then sidewalks and trees, same way, can't put the sidewalks in, or they have limitations. They'll have to pay into the sidewalk fee that allows the city. We'll continue our connectivity, we'll continue to put sidewalks in, but we may be able to put them in somewhere else in the city. Same with the trees. Any questions about escrow funds? We're really trying to look at these sources of these funds and make sure that we're utilizing these funds first. And then I'm going to hand it over to Lauren for grants.
So we have a wide variety of grants throughout the city as well. Grants typically start at the department level, so departments are applying as funding opportunities arise with these grants, and then finance comes in and verifies and tracks the expenditures and the requests for reimbursements on these grants. Up here is a list of several of the grants, and we will talk a little bit more about them. Grants are typically a reimbursement basis, so the city will pay for the equipment or infrastructure or personnel and then request that reimbursement. An exception to that is the American Rescue Plan Act, and we'll go into that one. But on that one, we receive the funding in advance and then reimburse ourselves. So the American Rescue Plan Act, this came out of the COVID-19 pandemic. It started at the federal level and then provided states with funding. The funding that the city received is based on population. So the city received $6.1 million. And then we have been continuously reporting back to the federal government how we are spending these funds and what qualified uses our projects fall into. Several of the projects are listed up here. The 1849 Park, we are doing lighting and parking additions. This allows us to maximize our field use out there. Many of the fields are not lit, so practices have to end when the sun goes down. And then parking is not available for some of the larger fields like the football field and such. Again, this has been a wide variety of uses. We also did small business grants. This was more around the time of the pandemic where we were able to fund small businesses to help them continue their operations during the pandemic. They had to submit an application, meet a bunch of qualifications, and then were approved for that funding. One of the more recent grants that we passed on through this funding was through Food Fairness. This addressed local food insecurity through the Pflugerville ISD schools. And this 501c3 nonprofit was able to pay off lunch debt for children that are not able to pay for their lunches. We've also done several infrastructure type upgrades at the city. We have been going through our financial enterprise resource planning software upgrade. So that's our finance and HR software that was a much needed upgrade to bring us into a cloud-based system, to create efficiencies throughout the city, and allows us, during times like the pandemic and winter storms and things like that, to make sure that we're continuing to be efficient in providing services to the city. That includes our utility billing software that's going through its upgrade right now. We also were able to do this on the permitting side. That was a much needed upgrade that had been put off. And so we were able to use this funding to get that taken care of. Along with that, we also did our voice over IP system upgrade. So prior to the pandemic, we were still, we could only access our phones mostly in office. With the pandemic and winter storms and stuff, we're sent home. So this allowed us to upgrade that infrastructure to be able to answer the phones from home and create that efficiency to keep citizens connected. Another one that we also recently did was our PD generator. We replaced it from diesel fuel to natural gas. So that ensures during like a winter storm and such, they have a constant fuel supply and keeps their operations going. Any questions on that? That's a big funding grant for us. Okay. Another grant that is a continuation grant is our Community Development Block Grant. This comes from the Housing and Urban Development, so HUD. And it provides us an annual grant based on a formula unique to our city. It helps out low income to moderate low income areas of the city, revitalizing those areas through like infrastructure upgrades. They also provide like rec scholarships, so allows families to apply and potentially have their funding or their camps and classes paid for through the rec center. A big one of that is our fun camp. So it's a summer camp that we offer all summer long that provides what may be that gap in like childcare for the summer and such. Currently, they're also doing street lights in areas of the city that have those gaps, neighborhoods that are lacking street lights. And they often do reconstruction of roadways, also typically in residential areas. They have one currently going on that addresses drainage issues and also directly affects like over 100 homes in that area. So they try to hit different pockets of the city. We have library grants. A lot of times these are coming through the Texas Commission on the Arts. They promote programming at the library as well as different resources for our citizens, learning, workforce development, things like that. LinkedIn Learning is, we receive a grant from PCDC for that. So all you have to do is be a member of the library and you can access these learning materials that assist with different, if you're trying to get a job or develop your skills, things like that. And then we have some Parks and Recreation grants. Currently, they have a large landscaping project that's passed down through TxDOT. And then just filling in maintenance and trees and things like that in our service areas. And then we also received through the USDA Forest Service and the Arbor Day Foundation a large grant for replanting. So this is areas of the city that they've evaluated that are lacking trees that provide like a canopy of less heat, more shade, more availability for kind of residential areas to be able to people to be outside and things like that. Police also has a wide variety of grants. Their project, Safe Neighborhoods, that is a continuation grant. We have flock safety cameras, and it provides the funding for that software. They have both the Internet Crimes Against Children and the Gangs and Violent Crimes Enforcement grants. These are grants that are passed through the Office of the Governor, and they provide equipment and training, and sometimes they fund the personnel to look into these specific investigations. They also do an impaired driving grant. So it allows us to have additional officers on the street to try to crack down on drunk driving. This is during holidays. So you'll see it at spring break and 4th of July and Labor Day. That's through TxDOT to try to reduce crime accidents. Some of their other grants, they typically always look for like mental health grants. They apply for those through different programs to assist with providing our officers with mental health resources. They're constantly looking for ways that they can provide extra funding through their department and kind of assist with some of those expenses. And then public work grants. A couple of these grants are to meet safety needs. Typically, these are infrastructure improvements that are listed in our current CIP, so they are known needs for the city. And then if they are able to find a grant that will assist with some or all of the funding for those, they will apply. One of them is the Pecan Street improvements, so that's met the need of this grant for safety and mobility, and so they applied that CIP project, was awarded, and then we'll do a reimbursement basis on that. So we'll fund the project and then request reimbursement for that. Same with the Colorado River Pump Station generator. That's same thing, providing natural gas to a critical piece of infrastructure at the city. We were able to, it was already identified as part of our CIP, and so then we were able to get this grant to help pay for and offset some of those. Grants, I went through that kind of quickly, but if you have any questions or would like to know any more about any of our grants.
I think just, towards the end where you were just talking about the different agencies identifying grants and going after them for specific projects, is that kind of left up to the agencies to go out and kind of do that work? I know the comptroller of the state puts out a pretty robust list of the various grant opportunities, but is that left, or is it more coordinated from the top down of here are some things that we should be doing, or some grants projects that might align with that?
For the most part, it's decentralized within the city, so we do leave it to the departments who know their programs and projects the best, because there's a great deal of grant writing and kind of discussing the very specific details of how that grant would apply to what they're looking for.
Yeah.
We also have some assistance with our engineers, so like our capital improvement plan and our projects. Those engineers that are on those, for instance, I know we applied for a reclaimed water grant, which we didn't reference here, but I mean those grants that are specific to those projects, we do get assistance from those engineering firms.
Sure.
So that's kind of an extra assistance that we have there. Internally, we don't have a grant department or a grant coordinator, so we, like she said, we are decentralized in that area.
Yeah.
But once grants are awarded, then it's finance. Like, we have a form that they complete so that we know exactly like what it's for, what are the terms,
Yeah.
when does it end, when do we need to make sure that we've submitted these expenditures and gotten these reimbursements. And so Lauren is our coordinator from the finance department that just makes sure that all of that occurs. But
Yeah, I just know as far as like the reporting and everything goes, it's become a lot more cumbersome over the last 3 to 5 years or so, especially since COVID, of what's expected once you get a grant. So
yeah.
the decentralized, as far as like going after it, but signing Lauren up for all the reporting and everything afterwards can be.
So
can
they'll
kinda be
do
a lot.
the project
Yeah.
reporting.
Sure,
We'll
yeah.
do the financial
Yeah.
reporting. So we do divide and conquer a little
Yeah.
bit on that side of it.
Sure.
But you're right. Like, grants are wonderful,
Mm-hmm.
and we should always try to seek out grants. But there is definitely an administrative component to taking grants on.
For sure.
So. But as you can see, we have a lot of sources of funds. Yes, some of them are specific, so we just have to keep an eye out when we see expenditures. Are like, wait, instead of using general fund, we have this, bucket over here that would fall into, and we want to make sure that we use those funds first. And from a policy standpoint, that's our policy, is to use those restricted funds first.
I don't think I have anything
That's
else.
all we got for y'all, unless you have more
Sweet.
questions. You can actually eat your food here.
Yeah, I appreciate
Very
it.
informative.
Very informative.
Well, very good. I guess we'll,
With that.
someone gonna make
Move
a
to
motion
adjourn?
to adjourn.
Yeah,
A second.
awesome.
All right, very
In favor.
good.